TFE fam, welcome back. It is me, BrittReacts, with another highly requested video. But also, as soon as you someone, I think he mentioned it. And anyway, it doesn't matter. We'll talk about it on the other side. Listen, the video is an hour and 8 minutes long. I'm gonna have to split this one up into two parts. I don't have a lot of time. It's the life of a mom, a homeschooling mom, and all the things. This one will be a two-parter. Don't hate me for it. I love you, okay? This is the fat electrician, America's ace of aces, Richard Dick, as you guys like to call him, Bong.
Being an ace means that you downed 5 enemy aircraft. Being a double ace means that you downed 10 enemy aircraft.
We learned that.
But being the ace of aces means that you downed the most enemy aircraft.
Right. That's how we came up.
Today
That's
we're
how
talking
we
about
came
Richard
up.
Ira Bong. He is America's ace of aces, credited with downing 40 enemy planes in the Pacific theater of World War II from the cockpit of his legendary P-38 Lightning, Marge, affectionately nicknamed after his wife. And just to be clear, when I say he's credited with downing 40 enemy planes, those are confirmed either by film or by eyewitness. He downed 40 planes. That does not include his probables. That does not include all the planes that he critically damaged first and then let his men finish off so that it could boost their morale. And it does not include the giant crocodile. But we're gonna get to that right after an awkwardly relevant word from our sponsors. This video is brought to you by War Thunder. They've got over 2,500 tanks, planes, and ships, pretty much all of them between World War II and modern time. And my favorite part about it is not only how accurate the vehicles are, but all the historical Easter eggs that they also have in the game. For an awkwardly relevant example, let's say that I wanted to play as a P-38, but I don't want to just play as any P-38. I want to play as Richard Bong's P-38. It's actually possible to get an exact replica of his legendary plane, Marge. It has the red nose cones and wingtips that were unique to him because paint was so hard to come by in the Pacific theater. It has the portrait of his wife and the cursive lettering Marge next to it, as well as all the flags symbolizing his downed enemies. Even the serial number on the side is accurate. And it's not just the paint job that's accurate, it's everything else. You can go in and see what type of engines his plane had. You can see what kind of guns and cannons are in the nose cone. You can see what type of bombs it's capable of dropping. You can see the self-healing fuel tanks, the cockpit, everything. And then after you're done checking everything out, you can actually go fly it and shoot down enemies yourself. Wow. So if you wanted to give War Thunder a try, it is free to play on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. And when you use my link down below, it's going to get you a bunch of freebies to get you started off on the right foot. And then, of course, we do have to give a special thank you to Delete Me. It's the best business model on the planet. You give them money, they make sure that data brokers on the internet aren't selling your personal information. If you like privacy, you're going to love Delete Me. As always, that's going to be linked down below and over at thefatelectrician.com. Let's get back to the video.
Yeah. Little Richard.
September 24th, 1920, Richard Bong is born. He grows up on his...
September 24th, 4 days before my birthday and 68 years before then. Still shout out to whoever sent me this. I mean, I can't get over it. I feel like maybe I need to pull this out. Instead of asking you guys, I can just open up my military slang book.
All right, September 24th, 1920, Richard Bong is born. He grows up on his family farm in Poplar, Wisconsin, an extremely small rural town. His father, Carl, is a first-generation Swedish immigrant, and Richard is the oldest of 9 siblings. Okay, look, I'm not going to beat this into the ground, but I need us all on the same page. Richard Bong is a farm kid from the Midwest that grew up during the Great Depression as the oldest of 9 siblings, okay? He was probably tougher than me and you combined by the time that he was 8 years old.
Right.
I'm just going to leave it at that. Speaking of when he was 8 years old, that is actually when fate would step into this story. You see, young Richard, or Dick as everybody called him at this point, was pretty much your average farm kid from the 1920s. He got up before...
I'm forever immature because can someone tell me how we got Dick from the name Richard? Anyone solve this problem for me. I will pin your comment at the top. I need to know. How did that happen? The same with Bobby out of Robert. How and why?
I'm just going to leave it at that. Speaking of when he was 8 years old, that is actually when fate would step into this story. You see, young Richard, or Dick as everybody called him at this point, was pretty much your average farm kid from the 1920s. He got up before the sun did chores until it was time to go to school, went to school, did the best he could, came home, worked until the sun went down, had dinner, went to bed. But then in the summer of 1928, something amazing happened, or at least something amazing to an 8-year-old that's never seen a plane that's grown up in a cornfield. A plane flew by one morning. But it wasn't just any plane, it was a US Army plane, and it flew by so low that Richard could actually see the pilot in the cockpit, and he waved at him, and the pilot actually waved back. Then later that day, when Richard was doing his evening chores out in the field, the plane flew by again, this time going the other way. And the next morning, the same thing happened.
It's like a firefighter.
And the day after that, and the day after that. It went on for weeks. Richard has no idea at the time, but that plane is actually carrying the mail of President Calvin Coolidge, who had decided to take his summer vacation in the next town over, Superior, Wisconsin. And it just so happens that the Bong family farm is directly in the flight path. This seemingly random act of fate is what sparks Dick Bong's initial interest in aviation. And at the age of 8 years old, he becomes completely obsessed. Every spare second he has with his extremely busy, manual labor-filled childhood, he spends researching and studying aviation. He reads every book from every public library that he can convince his parents to take him to. For every birthday and Christmas, he is asking for scale model replicas of different planes. But then one day his dad, a World War I veteran, tells him a story that he remembers from his time in the service. The incredible story of America's ace of aces, Eddie Rickenbacker, the race car driver that turned into a fighter pilot and is credited with downing 26 enemy aircraft.
Oh, the one the other guy tied with. What was his name?
World War I. And with that, it becomes Dick Bong's life ambition to become a fighter pilot. Okay, but here's the problem with that. At this point in time, America's not at war, and generally speaking, whenever a country, particularly America, is not at war, the standards of certain jobs or the entry into the military at all gets raised pretty significantly because they only want the best of the best because there's a limited amount of jobs. When there is a war, they need a bunch of more people, the standards get lowered, we bring a bunch of people in, okay? Now, there's no war, so the standards are very high. If you want to be a fighter pilot, you need to be a military officer and you have to have gone to college for 2 years. Why is that such a problem?
Really?
He's like 10 when he decides this. So like 1930, the Great Depression started in 1929, okay? During the Great Depression, over 20,000 American schools just closed down and kids couldn't even go to school if they wanted to. And most of the kids didn't want to because they had to stay home and work or go do odd jobs to try to make money so that their family didn't starve to death. So for a farm kid growing up in rural Wisconsin, this is going to be an extremely uphill battle. And despite that, he does it anyways. He goes to school, he works his ass off, and he is almost the top of his class every single year. And then
who are these superhumans?
Year of high school, and he finishes it. Problem. His town just doesn't have a senior year for high school, so he can't graduate. So he does what he can do. He figures it out. He enrolls in...
No one else is thrown off by the fact that his town doesn't offer a senior year, so no one can graduate? Who, what, when, where, how, and why? Now, in the comments. Fill them up. I need to know. Why would you have every other grade except for senior year where there was no one qualified to teach? What?
High school, so he can't graduate. So
I'm amazed and infuriated all at the same time.
He enrolls in Superior, Wisconsin high school, 30 miles away, and just figures out how to make it to school every single day. And ends up graduating 14th in his class of over 400. Okay, next problem. Got to go to college. Finally, this kid catches a break because there's also a college in Superior, Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin Superior. So he applies, he gets in, starts going to college. He's not really going for anything in particular. He has zero ambitions of getting or finishing any degrees. He just needs to get 2 years worth of credits to be a fighter pilot because that's all he cares about. And then fate seemingly steps in again. In 1938, so his first year of college, the United States government passes the Civil Aeronautics Act, which is essentially, on paper, what they said it was for was to train the next generation of pilots because commercial flight and a bunch of other things was going to become available on the civilian side. What it was actually for was the U.S. government knew that World War II was looming and they wanted to get as many people trained in flying planes as possible so that hopefully a bunch of them would either volunteer to go into the military or they could then draft them into the military.
I'm both amazed and infuriated. Will this be a running theme in Dick Bong's story? it feels that way, friends.
Hopefully, a bunch of them would either volunteer to go into the military or they could then draft them into the military because they knew they were going to need a ton of pilots if war broke out. So the United States government is going to foot the bill for college students to learn how to become pilots, and as it would just so happen, one of the first colleges in the country to get this program was the University of Wisconsin-Superior, and Dick Bong was one of the first people to apply and get accepted. So now he's getting college credit to fly planes. It's like a dream come true. He absolutely loves it. He is a complete natural at flying. He is the top of his class when he finishes the course. He then gets enough college credits to get accepted into the military academy in June of 1941, and right as he is about to graduate from the academy, the attack on Pearl Harbor happens.
Right, of course.
This changes the entire trajectory of Dick's career. You got to realize he's almost done with his training, and now there's going to be this massive wave of new recruits that both volunteered and got drafted coming in behind him. So he's like in this bottleneck, essentially getting shoved through the training as fast as possible. And when he gets out of the training, he's going to be one of the most experienced pilots the military has, and pretty much all of their pilots are going to end up being trainers, including Dick Bong. He ends up getting stuck being a gunnery instructor on the T-6 Texan, and honestly, it probably sucks, right? Because he ends up having to instruct all the new guys, and then the new guys get to go off to war and have his dream job. He's been working his ass off since he was 8 years old to meet these incredibly high standards, and then the second he meets those standards, gets his foot in the door, a mob of people comes running past him, and he's basically stuck there holding the...
Let me ask you something. Do you guys think that the pilots like Dick and the other ones that came in, and do you think they realized that that's what happened? Like the U.S. and the government knew that war was about to happen, and so they gave them this free education. Do you think they figured that out, or is that something that we learned way later in hindsight? Like, I'm just interested to know, like, do you guys think that, like, once war broke out, they were like, oh, that's why they offered this for free? Or did they just think it was a coincidence? I'm amazed and I'm infuriated for Dick, because he deserved to be on the fighting side of things and not training people.
His foot in the door, a mob of people comes running past him, and he's basically stuck there holding the door open for everybody else. And the T-6 Texan at this point in time that he's training all these guys on is just a trainer plane. Like, they're not sending T-6 Texans out onto the battlefield. Right. So he's literally stuck teaching guys how to fly the trainer plane, which means that Dick Bong hasn't really been assigned to what type of pilot he's going to be, and he really doesn't have a say if that day ever even comes. So he's actually training all these guys in gunnery.
Is that him?
How to be a fighter pilot, even though he's not even assigned as a fighter pilot. If his day comes where they do send him to war, they can still make him a bomber pilot. So he's essentially training people to take his dream job from him.
All right, kiss my ass. Kiss his ass. Kiss your ass.
But then one day, as fate would have it, yet again, on May 1st, 1942, a fighter pilot shows up to his airstrip in a brand new P-38, and he wants some extra training. And Dick's happy to oblige, but the problem is he's flying a T-6 Texan, and this guy's in a P-38. The T-6 Texan is so old and outdated that it's only getting used as a training vehicle, and the P-38 is the hot new thing, okay? It's better than the T-6 in pretty much every conceivable way. Dick Bong is probably about to get smoked. Despite that, Dick Bong dons his plot armor and goes in and actually whoops this P-38 pilot's ass 15 times over. If this was a real dogfight, he would have shot him down multiple times. They land, the P-38 pilot gets out, goes, debriefs with Dick's chain of command, and informs them that's the best natural pilot I've ever come across. Ever. He's like, that dude's in a T-6 Texan and I couldn't get him off of me. Why is he here? At which point the chain of command's like,
what'd I say?
Maybe we should do something
Utilize
with him.
him.
So they assign him to a fighter wing and send him off to go train on the P-38 Lightning.
I'm out.
All right, we need to take a minute and fully appreciate how badass the P-38 Lightning is, because it's probably one of the most slept-on planes of World War II, and for that reason, it's probably my favorite. Now, the reason the P-38 gets overlooked so often is because, generally speaking, whenever we're talking about fighter planes of World War II, we're talking about either the European theater or the Pacific theater, and when we're talking about the Pacific, it's usually carrier-based planes that we're talking about, because that was all the biggest battles of the Pacific theater. The Battle of Midway, the Battle of the Philippine Sea. They were all carrier.
Let me, talk to the dictionary here. Why they call it a theater? Is that where they perform? Is that where it goes down? Do you think that's in here? Anyone? There are some words in here that I am afraid to repeat, guys. Wow. Look at this photo. Nope, not seeing it. Hold on. Let me check Pacific Theater and see if that there. I mean, some of the words in here are make me blush. Nope. All right, let me know, guys. Why is it a P38 can opener? Pew pew. I say that all the time. I'm getting so distracted. A penis puffer.
All the biggest battles of the Pacific Theater, the Battle of Midway,
Jesus.
the Battle of the Philippine Sea. They were all carrier-based aircraft, and the P-38 is not that. We also didn't see it very much in the European theater because it didn't perform very well in the colder temperatures seen at the higher altitudes above Europe. But it was absolutely wrecking house above North Africa and the Pacific Theater. It was just taking off from islands instead of aircraft carriers.
Okay.
The Germans that ran into it over North Africa started referring to it as the fork-tailed devil, and the Japanese called it 2 planes, 1 pilot. Yes, I realize there was a shitty joke there about a cup and a couple of girls, but we're not going to make that joke. We're just going to keep moving. Enemy pilots absolutely hated going up against the P-38 Lightning because it wasn't really a fight. It was more or less them getting sucker punched, and then if they were lucky enough to survive, they got to lose a drag race after that. And this is because the P-38 Lightning isn't a fighter plane, right? The first letter in a plane's name is its designation. For example, F stands for fighter, B stands for bomber. So the F-4F Wildcat is a fighter. It starts with the letter F. The B-17 is a bomber. It starts with the letter B. P actually stands for pursuit, like the P-51 Mustang, but it's technically not a pursuit plane either because it didn't meet the criteria. It's just the one that fit the closest. They actually had to come up with a new designation just for this plane because it was so overpowered, they didn't have a category that it fit into. You see, the P-38 was actually designed prior to World War II, so nobody had any idea what aerial combat was gonna look like, so they were just like, fuck it, let's make a plane that's awesome at everything. The committee in charge of developing the P-38 literally just looked around at all of the other types of planes, the fighters, the pursuits, the bombers, and like, yeah, we want all of the upsides and none of the downsides. Make it happen. The spec sheet that they put out to military contractors on what they wanted this plane to be capable of didn't really read like a spec sheet. It read more like an impossible wish list. Nobody even knew if this was possible. They wanted this plane to be able to fly a minimum of 360 miles an hour in level flight, which at this point in time was fucking
impossible.
Cooking. But I mean, you can build a fast plane. That's not really an issue. Then they also wanted it to have a ton of firepower. They wanted it to have 4 50 caliber machine guns and a 20 millimeter cannon, which, okay, a little bit harder, but you can still build a fast plane that's got a couple of guns on it. They also wanted it to be able to climb up to 20,000 feet in less than 6 minutes. Okay, now we're really pushing what a plane can do. Oh, and by the way, we also want it to be able to carry 1,000 pounds of bombs while it does it. Which is really the tipping point, because now not only is that borderline impossible, it's also not even allowed, because technically a fighter and a pursuit airplane are only allowed to have 500 pounds of bombs. They want to double it and make it faster than any other fighter on the market and have more guns than pretty much any other fighter. So when they put out the bid for this plane to be built, they're not allowed to call it a fighter or a pursuit aircraft because it exceeds the limitations for those categories. So they're like, fuck it, we're just going to come up with our own category. We're going to call it the Interceptor. Good. Yeah, the committee in charge of developing the P-38 is on some gangster shit. They're like, well, we can't call it a pursuit aircraft because that implies that they might actually get away, and they're not gonna. And we can't call it a fighter because that implies that they stand a chance once we get there, and they don't. So we're actually going to request an Interceptor, which is some shit that we just made up, okay? The moral of that story is that this should actually be called the I-38 Lightning, not the P-38 Lightning. The problem with this is all just one big ask, and none of the defense contractors think that this is even possible to actually make. Except for one, Lockheed, because they have this new badass aeronautical engineer by the name of Kelly Johnson. If you don't know who Kelly Johnson is, he's the man that would later go on to be the founder of Skunk Works, America's premier top secret plane development program that is responsible for a ton of innovation like the SR-71 Blackbird and the F-22 Raptor. So Kelly Johnson and his crew are the ones that are going to take on the challenge of developing the P-38 Lightning, and it becomes very apparent to them pretty much right out of the gate, it's not possible to do this with a single plane engine like most fighters have. So they're like, we're going to
Double
have
it.
2 plane engines. So like, fuck it, let's just take 2 fighters and slap them together. I mean, it works in checkers. Why wouldn't it work in aerial combat, right?
it.
Jimmy, grab that fighter plane, bring it over here and king me. And just so we're all on the same page, a single one of these engines is more than enough to keep this plane in the air. With 2 of them, this plane is going to be capable of traveling 413 miles an hour in level flight.
Which is more than what they wanted.
Perspective, that's roughly 100 miles an hour faster than any other fighter plane on the planet at this point in time in 1940.
He's so fast. He makes fast people look not fast.
Not only is it going to be significantly
movie was
faster,
that?
it's also going to have significantly more firepower. Most fighters have like 450 caliber machine guns. The P-38 is going to have 450 caliber machine guns and a 20 millimeter cannon mounted in the nose, and it can carry bombs or rockets. And then on top of that, not only
Look
do
at
these
that.
massive engines allow it to go faster while carrying more firepower, it also is allowed to operate at a higher altitude, meaning that now they are always going to have the high ground when they enter into a dogfight. So when the P-38s show up, they get to attack you from above.
And we know how important the high ground is, but like, what is the technology that they were able to develop back then that would allow them? That is why the brain is incredible.
High ground when they enter into a dogfight. So when the P-38s show up, they get to attack you from above at speeds that you can't match, and then if you're lucky enough to
double
survive,
everything.
they get to just roadrunner themselves out of the equation because they're 100 miles an hour faster than you and you can't catch them. But that's assuming that they want to run away, because the P-38 Lightnings are also more maneuverable than a ton of modern fighters as well, because the massive dovetail allows them to catch more wind, giving them a tighter turn radius, so they can probably beat you in a dogfight anyways. They are an absolute nightmare to deal with, and Dick Bong is about to go train and become Freddy Krueger. So by June
Freddy
1942, Bong is nearing the end of his training on the P-38. He's exceptional at flying it. He's the top of his class. And then he goes and does something kind of stupid. So he's out on one of his last training flights that he's ever going to have in the P-38. And he decides, you know, it'd be pretty cool since I'm about to graduate and I probably won't get in very much trouble because they're going to send me off to war anyways. I should take my P-38 and weave it in and out of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And then I should fly it right down Market Street, 30 feet above the street, literally in between the buildings of San Francisco. So that's what he does. And his plane is flying so low to the ground that the wind coming off of it is actually ripping clothes off of clotheslines throughout San Francisco. And then he makes his way back to the base. And
Why would he do that? Why would he do that? Did he think that a little boy would see him and have the same reaction he had to the mail carrier? Why would he do that? Does it speak to his ego? Why would he do that? Why would he do that? There's not a good reason to do that. Why would he do that? Do you get arrested? What do they do? Insubordination? Do they de-rank you? Do you go back to base camp? Like, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Clotheslines throughout San Francisco.
Why
and then
would
he makes
he do
his way
that?
back to the base, and he is in a whole world of trouble. More than he ever thought he would be. And this is the part where most people are like, oh, he's probably going to get in trouble because that seems pretty dangerous. And like, yeah, that's a small part of it, but you have to appreciate the bigger context of what's going on at this point in time, right? It's June 1942. The attack on Pearl Harbor happened 6 months ago, okay? And this kid decided it'd be funny to take his very strange, lesser-known, military-looking plane and fly it through a national monument and then down the middle of a major metro area. In San Francisco, of all places, which is probably one of the most likely targets of the Japanese Empire if they were going to attack America again, similar to how they did at Pearl Harbor. This scared the holy shit out of a lot of people. I mean, rightfully so. This is literally no different than if a commercial pilot decided to fly his commercial airliner really close to a skyscraper in New York City in January of 2002. Okay, like, a lot of people are really freaked out by this, and they have a great reason to be. Now, in Dick Bong's defense, obviously, he wasn't thinking about that at the time. He's like a 21-year-old dumb kid that's just excited inside of a fucking warplane. Like, a lot of people would have done the same exact thing. He feels horrible, and he gets called in to General Kenny's office, the guy running the entire training program, and he's shitting his pants. He knows that he is about to get probably kicked out of the military, grounded, potentially even thrown in jail. And General Kenny has been following
I
Bong's
was
career
right.
closely
All the
ever
things.
since he showed up at school to learn how to fly the P-38, and he is super disappointed that his top student would decide to do something this stupid. He brings him into the office.
Reckless.
Dick Bong is nervous. This kid's shitting bricks. He can barely look the general in the eye, and the general's basically like, dude,
what the fuck, man?
and Dick does the best thing he absolutely could have done. He just completely owns up to it and is honest and upfront with General Kenny. He's like, look, I'm sorry. I'll take whatever punishment I need. That wasn't my intention. I was just a young, dumb kid, excited, horsing around. It wasn't the right thing to do. I'm sorry. And at this point, General Kenny realizes on one hand, you can't do this shit, but on the other hand, this is exactly the type of guy you're going to need if you want to win this war. He then tells Dick, and I quote,
It's so interesting that as I watch more and more of these videos, that tends to be the thing, is like the superiors are so in tune and understand what type of person it takes to be successful. Like all the men who kind of get themselves in these like in some type of trouble, right? It seems the story is that the men that are superior to them can see through that, right? Like you have to have vision and understanding of what it takes on the other side of things. And I think that's so cool to realize that these men could really recognize that in these young men who have no idea what they're going up against, but they can identify like, yep, that's the type of recklessness I'm gonna need in the field. I think that's cool.
this is exactly the type of guy you're going to need if you want to win this war. He
An
then tells
idiot.
Dick, and I quote, son, the fact is, if you didn't want to do loops through that bridge or fly down Market Street at second floor level, I wouldn't want you. Now, I'm paraphrasing for this part, but he more or less says, so here's what's going to happen. I had a woman call the base this morning, furious that one of my planes took out all of her laundry off of her clothesline and blew them all over Market Street. So,
Go get
you're
her
gonna
clothes.
you're going to find that woman, you're going to do her laundry, and then while it's drying, you're going to do any chore around the house that she asks you to. You're then going to
That's a good
fold her
punishment.
laundry, and then you're going to come back, and this shit never happened, and he tears up all the reports and throws them in the trash. So Bong, realizing he's basically getting a second chance, happily runs off and does that, and like an hour later,
Yeah, I'll
General
clean
Kenny
your
gets a
drawers,
phone
lady.
call
Where are
to
you?
inform him that he's no longer going to be running the training for P-38s outside of San Francisco. He's being moved into the Pacific Theater, and he is going to be running the entire air war in the Pacific. And he requests that he has one pilot come with him that he wants to remain under his
Dick
command,
Bong.
and that pilot's name is Dick Bong.
Ding,
need your help. I can't tell you what it is. I'm gonna hurt some people.
ding dong. Oh, I've
Please calm
seen this.
down.
I've seen this
So
where they
fast
rob the
forward like a month,
banks.
Bong is over in the Pacific Theater.
What
He's
movie
setting
is
up
that?
shop. He's getting his plane squared
That's a good
away.
one.
He's getting ready to fight this war. And then there's this advisor for the U.S. government that comes in, some fighter pilot from World War I that's going around from airbase to airbase, consulting and basically just seeing what's going on and, you know, making suggestions. This fighter pilot's name was Eddie Rickenbacker, Bong's childhood hero, America's original Ace of Aces. So Rickenbacker's over there. He's talking to Bong and some other young pilots and General Kenny. He's telling them stories, and they get on the topic of how he actually broke the record and got 26 downed enemy aircrafts. And Eddie Rickenbacker tells him, well, for one, we were flying over land, so whenever I shot somebody down, there was never any doubt, right? So, like, I could see the wreckage on the ground later that day. I could go back and check, and we could
Right.
verify things, whereas you guys are fighting over the ocean. If you shoot a plane down, it sinks. We have no idea if you actually shot it down or not. And the other thing is there's so many Germans in the sky of World War I just had more opportunities than you guys are probably going to have. At this point, Dick Bong chimes in and is like, actually, sir, I hear we have plenty of Japanese to shoot at up in the sky around here. Eddie Rickenbacker kind of just smiles, clearly understanding that this was a challenge from this young pilot. And he says, I'll tell you what, if you can shoot down more Japanese than I shot down Germans, I'll buy you a case of scotch. At which point, General Kenny immediately
That's it.
says, and I'll double it. And then the next man up the chain of command, General Hap Arnold, hears about this and says, and I'll buy a case of champagne. And then the next guy up the chain of command, General MacArthur, says, I'll double the champagne as well.
Double it!
Then, unfortunately, this gets picked up by the media and they make a big deal out of it. You know, they've got the picture and the headline, and it's like, America's Ace of Aces, Eddie Rickenbacker, and America's top generals make bets for alcohol with young pilots to down enemies. And there's like a bunch of public backlash because you got to remember, Prohibition was 10 years
yeah.
prior. Alcohol is still very controversial, and a bunch of people feel like, you know, you shouldn't be bribing these young men with alcohol. They should just go out there and fight and
I
never
don't
have
feel
fun
that was
and
a
come back home.
bribe.
Because of that, the chain of command
It's an
kind of backpedals. They put out a
incentive.
statement being like, okay, fine, whatever. We changed the bet to Coca-Cola instead. And then they ended
Ice
up giving
cream.
Dick Bong and a bunch of other young pilots a ton of Coca-Cola, and it ends up being his favorite drink.
I must have drank me about 15 Dr. Peppers.
Now, Bong isn't ready to be the
Forrest.
man yet, right? He's never actually been in combat, so he needs to be tutored. He needs to go out there with an actual experienced pilot that's going to help guide him through the chaos of battle. And he gets assigned to be the wingman to one of America's top aces at this point in time, a guy by the name of Thomas Lynch. In December
a
of
hottie.
1942, Bong is out on a
Intense.
mission in a squadron of 12 P-38s led by Sam Lynch, and they end up running in to 40 Japanese planes, and they actually engage. They actually end up shooting down 12 Japanese planes, 2 of which were knocked out by Bong himself, earning him his first 2 downed enemy aircraft and a Silver Star. From here on out, it's just consistent. 1 enemy here, 2 enemies there. By the next month, January 1943, Dick Bong becomes an ace pilot after downing 5 enemy aircraft. And right around this point in time, Bong actually ends up leaving the mentorship of Thomas Lynch because Thomas Lynch actually ends up getting sent back over stateside because he needs to go on leave because he is being such a successful combat pilot that he has the most downed enemies out of anybody in the entire United States military at this point in time with 15. So Thomas Lynch is essentially getting sent home to protect him because he's America's top ace. The last thing they want to do is have him get shot down in combat. And right now in the media, everybody knows his name and like the other 9 of the top 10 aces. And everybody's trying to speculate who and if and when somebody is actually going to break Eddie Rickenbacker's record and become the new ace of aces. So a lot of the top guys at this point in time are all getting sent back stateside to do like war bonds drives, recruiting, improve morale, raise money, things like that. And this is going to actually end up giving Dick Bong a
The
chance
opportunity
to catch up.
to play catch up. After
So
a
with Lynch
while,
stepping aside for the time
Crocodile.
being, Bong is now running the squadron, and on one of his very first missions, things just get weird. One of his wingmen has one of his engines go down, and he doesn't think that he's going to be able to limp it all the way back to the base, and he really doesn't want to try to land it at the base because P-38s at this point in time are very hard to come by. If you lose your plane, you might not get another one. So the last thing he wants to do is try to land it on the airstrip and accidentally end up taking out even more planes because that's going to hurt the war effort even more. So they make the decision the best thing they can possibly do is for Yeager, this young pilot, to bail out, and then they'll just have to recover him. He'll live, the plane's gone, it's going to be what it's going to be. That sucks. So they're trying to limp this plane back and find a good spot for Yeager to bail out. Bong calls back to base and gets a smaller recon plane known as a Piper Cub up in the air, and they're going to help keep track of Yeager once he does bail out so that they don't lose track
How
of
do
him
they
so that they can
move this
recover him
quickly
quickly.
to get
Now the ground
like
rescue crew is
how?
also on the way. The Piper Cub
I don't understand. Like, if a plane is falling out of the sky, how do you have time to get a new plane up there so that the guy can jump out and you can, like, how? Serious question.
Lose
How?
track of him so that they can recover him quickly. Now the ground rescue crew is also on the way. The Piper Cub finally shows up, gets eyes on Yeager. At this point, Bong is about to run out of fuel, so he's like, okay, Piper
gotta
Cub,
go.
you're going to keep eyes on him.
Piper
Bong
Cub.
goes back to base, lands, fuels back up, turns back around, and goes straight back to the lake to pull security in case any of the Japanese happen to find them, because the Japanese are well known for opening fire on any downed pilot or rescue crew that they can find. So Bong gets back to the lake. Remember, he's at a super high altitude because he wants to be able to see the enemy from as far away as possible. He's not
Right.
really concerned about what's going on with the men on the ground. So from his perspective, he sees that it looks like Yeager's made it to the shore of the lake. He seems to be all right-ish. Maybe he broke his leg. Who knows? We have no idea. The rescue crew, for whatever reason, decided that the fastest way they were going to be able to get to Yeager was to be able to take a rubber raft across the lake rather than skirting around the edge and fight in the jungle the entire time. So that seems fine. And then there's this big-ass log that's kind of like floating near that raft, right? So everything seems to be going just fine. So Bong radios over to the Piper Cub pilot and he's like, hey, I'm up above you. If you see anything, if you need anything, let me know. I'm right here. The Piper Cub pilot radios back frantic. He's like, dude, there's a fucking giant crocodile swimming up to the raft right now. That's not a log. That's a crocodile. Bong immediately dives and goes and he strafes this crocodile. And here's the thing with this that I forgot to mention during the P-38 chapter where I talked about the plane. As you already know, it's got 4 50 caliber machine guns, each of which is well capable of killing a crocodile.
Gator bites, anyone? Gator bites. Crocodile, alligator. Not gator bites. Crocodile bites, anyone? Croc bites? Croc tail. Because just smithereens, just pieces of them everywhere. Anyone hungry? Gumbo, if you will.
It's got 4 50 caliber machine guns, each of which is well capable of killing a crocodile. And then it has a 20 millimeter cannon, which is super duper capable of killing a crocodile.
Super duper
The thing
capable.
is, it's only got one trigger and it fires all of them. So yeah, the crocodile's dead. It basically gets aerosolized instantly. The crew rescues Jaeger. Everybody makes it back to the base. Hooray. Then everybody starts giving Bong shit like, hey, you know, we always paint a flag on the side of our plane when we down an enemy. Are you going to paint a crocodile on the side of yours? Should we double back and see if we can get the crocodile's
Y'all got
body and
jokes.
make some handbags
But
out of
he's
it? What are you
alive.
guys thinking? Then the media gets a hold of it and they run the story. They got funny headlines like lightning strikes gator, gator versus lightning,
Funny.
all kinds of crazy stuff.
Funny.
But regardless, it kind of fuels into Dick Bong's legend, and he is now on everybody's radar as the ace pilot / crocodile killer.
Crocodile hunter, if you will. Wrap him
So the
up.
media starts giving Dick Bong a lot more attention, but he doesn't pay much attention to it. He just keeps doing his job. He's growing into his shoes as the leader. He's going out, he's leading missions, and then he gets another kill and another, and then 2 more here, 2 more there. Next thing you know it, Bong is a double ace with 10 confirmed down enemy aircraft. So now, not only is Bong the crocodile hunter, but he is also rapidly catching up to his mentor, Thomas Lynch, for having the most confirmed kills in the entire United States military, and he is now in the running to become the new ace of aces. And right around this time, one of Bong's wingmen requested an audience with General Kenny because he had to tell him something about his star pilot, Dick Bong. This young pilot shows up in the office and tells General Kenny, "Sir, he's given away Japanese." And General Kenny is like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And he proceeds to tell this story about how they were out on a mission, and Bong shoots up this Zero to the point that, like, it's going down. The wing is literally tearing off the side of the cabin. At which point, Bong peels off and instructs his wingman to finish shooting that Zero down, even though it was already going down. And this young pilot figures like, okay, well, maybe he's just like training me. Maybe he wants me to get target practice. I have no idea while he's doing this. Then they land, they get back from the mission, and Bong comes up to him and he's like, hey, I saw you down that Zero. I'm willing to sign off on it so that you get that confirmed kill. At which point, this young pilot is like, no, you had that. It was already done. It was over with by the time I shot at it. That's your confirmed downed enemy. At which point Bong is like, look, you shot it last. It's yours. If you don't take it, I'm not gonna, so it's just gonna go untaken. At this point, General Kenny just smiles, tells this young pilot, look, whatever happened, that's between you and Bong. You guys can figure it out. You're dismissed. He leaves the room. General Kenny realizes that Dick Bong is being an exceptional leader. He's not trying
That's
to be...
what I was going to say. Like, what was the point of this young man snitching? Sir, take... He's giving away the Japanese. That's what I was like, what do you... Let me put my dictionary back. Don't piss me off. The man is doing you a favor. Take it. Take it, sir, and leave. Can I have an audience with you? No.
General Kenny realizes that
Take
Dick
an
Bong is being an
audience
exceptional
home.
leader. He's not trying to be a glory hog. He's not caring about this race to be the ace of aces.
Not in it
He's
for the
just going out there
accolades.
trying to make sure that he
Fighting
gets
for
the job
his
done
country.
effectively and keeps everybody as safe as possible. Now, that being said, General Kenny was also kind of interested to find out just how much
How
of a
many
badass
of them
his
he's been giving
starfighter
away.
pilot was at this point in time, so he kind of started to keep track the best he could and try to figure out what Bong's criteria was as to when he took the kill and when he gave it away. And what he was able to figure out was he figured that for every 2 kills that Bong took, he gave 1 away. So Bong could have easily ran up the scoreboard and padded his
Stand-up
stats to
human
be an
being.
even more impressive pilot than he already was, but he cared about his men more. And this would become even more apparent about a month later. He's racked up 5 more confirmed downed enemy aircrafts, tying him with his mentor Thomas Lynch for 15. If he shoots down
Wow.
1 more enemy plane, he becomes America's current ace of aces in World War II and the most likely man to break Eddie Rickenbacker's record. And he's out on a mission and he does just that. He downs 1 more enemy aircraft, and then he looks over and he sees that one of his wingmen has an engine down and he's desperately trying to limp his plane into the clouds as a Zero is closing in on him. Bong now has a decision to make. On one hand, he's the new ace of aces. He knows it. When he lands this plane, if he makes it home safe from this mission, he might never fly again. He probably doesn't have to if he doesn't want to. They'll ship him back home to America to sell war bonds where he can party and live up the high life for the rest of forever. He's a celebrity now. On the other hand, his guy needs help. He immediately dives and positions his P-38 in between his friend and the Zero in such a fashion that the Zero either has to veer off course or drive directly into Bong's plane, killing both of them. The Zero veers off, but now Bong needs to get his guy more time to be able to make it into the clouds so that the Zero doesn't get back on his tail. And the only way he can think to do that is to become a more enticing target so that the Zero tries to down him instead. So Bong shuts off one of his engines and then starts jerking the controls left and right and up and down, making the plane look unstable and like he's desperately trying to level it out so he doesn't crash. The Zero interprets this as Bong's about to go down, so he veers off towards Bong because he wants to for sure kill. So Bong basically baits this Zero away from his wingman, and then once he gets far enough away that his wingman's in the clouds and he should make it home safe, Bong starts the second engine and attempts to outrun him, at which point the Zero opens fire and shoots the cab, but Bong is just out of there because his plane is so much faster.
See you, chump.
A couple minutes later, the Zero ends up giving up. It
That made
peels
me
off.
anxious.
Bong's making his way back to the airstrip, and then suddenly the P-38 starts shaking violently, and Bong is like, what the fuck is going on? He's looking around. He turns around and looks, and the ass end of his plane is, well, half of it's just not there. Apparently that Zero had hit him with way more machine gun fire than he had thought, and he needs to be able to get this plane down now. Bailing out isn't really an option because there's Japanese all over the place and they're going to kill him or strafe him with machine gun fire the second he gets into his parachute. So he's got to try to land it somewhere. He knows that there's a nearby island that the Marines had just captured that they were working on building an airstrip on, but it wasn't finished yet. Okay, not a great option, but it's literally the best option he has. His options right now are land in the jungle or land on a partially built runway. So he opts for the runway. He radios ahead to the base like, hey, get the construction crews off that runway. I'm coming in hot. I'm about to wreck my plane. So he goes in, he lands, does everything he can to get this plane stopped in time, but it's just not possible. Ends up overshooting the runway and driving into the ditch in front of it. While he wasn't able to stop all the way on the runway, he was able to slow down enough that the ditch stopped him and he was able to walk away without a scratch on him. Upon inspecting his plane, he had been hit over 50 times from the Japanese Zero, with multiple rounds being stopped by the cockpit armor and saving his life. Dick Bong had almost died, yet somehow not even gotten hurt. It's a classic case of plot armor, and he is now also the top ace in World War II, and he doesn't even have a plane. That P-38's complete garbage now, and for most pilots, if you lost your plane, you probably weren't going to get another one for a long time, meaning that you were going to be grounded. However, this is Dick Bong, the top ace of World War II. They got him a new plane in like 2 weeks. So that's great, but the real problem that comes into play is now General Kenny's chain of command. You know, the top bosses are like, okay, well,
I couldn't help it. These are my intrusive thoughts. These are my intrusive thoughts. Y'all know that song? That thong, da, thong, thong. I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it.
That comes into play is now General Kenny's chain of command. You know, the top bosses are like, okay, well, your boy Bong is the top ace of World War II right now. We need to get him home. We need to keep him safe. We don't want him getting hurt. He's a celebrity. He's the Crocodile killer. But General Kenny knows Bong better than any of these guys, and he knows that Bong isn't interested in being the ace of aces. He's not going out there taking every kill he can. He's not trying to get stats. He's going out there and doing his job to the best of his ability and trying to save as many of his men as he possibly can. And for that reason, General Kenny wants him to be the #1 guy. But he also realizes that maybe that's not fair to Bong either, and maybe Bong does want to go back home, and that should be his reward if that's what he wants. So he kind of very tactfully puts the ball in Bong's court and gives him the choice of what he wants to do without actually doing that. And the way he goes about doing that is he tells Bong, hey, when you get 20 confirmed kills, I'm sending you home for 2 months for vacation. And he knows that this means that Bong is going to start giving him out when he hits that 20 kill mark, because he knows that Bong isn't a glory hound. He'll shoot down 20 enemy planes and give all the kills to his men if he wants to, and that's his choice to make now. So naturally, Bong does what any Midwestern farm kid would do, and he perfectly times him hitting 20 confirmed down enemies so that he makes it home to Wisconsin just in time for deer season.
I don't just knock them out, I pick the round.
All right, y'all, we are halfway through. I will see you tomorrow for part 2. Don't be mad at me. I gotta go. Like, I cannot sit here for 2 hours and film this. We're already at 42 minutes. I gotta cook dinner. We gotta get out of the house in time for a game. Like, come on. I love y'all. I love y'all, and you love me, and I know you understand. I'll see you tomorrow. Talk to me down below. Answer any questions, and no spoilers. Okay? I said what I said. Have the day you deserve. Bye.